This is Wretched Radio with Todd Friel.
So you wanna spice up your Sunday school class, do ya? This is Wretched Radio. If that is the cry of your heart, we have just the ticket for you.
Welcome to Wretched Worldview. On this episode, stay-at-home moms.
That'll do it. You want to get your Sunday school class perked up? Consider our brand new resource, Wretched Worldview. We tackle 22 contentious subjects, including the issue of stay-at-home moms. If you have heretofore had a rather lethargic Sunday school class, I'm just telling you, you're going to have a hard time controlling them. Why? Because they will engage biblically, not with mere opinions, but biblically to determine how do we work through contemporary issues. Dr. Owen Strand and I present 7 steps to follow. If you just methodically kind of check off these boxes as you ponder an issue, by the time you are done, and increasingly it'll take less and less time, you will have a biblical worldview on any subject. As we launch into Dr. Owen Strand talking about this rather tender issue, I have to confess to you, I find the 21st century an interesting place for us. Permit me to ask you a question. Are you of the mindset that the ideal scenario is for the dad to be out working while mom stays home and tends the kids? I think that's the predominant evangelical thinking. Yes, that is the biblical model. I think that's the biblical model, but culturally and contextually, it just looked a whole lot different until very recently, courtesy of, you may recall, the Industrial Revolution. Families were at home. Dad was a stay-at-home dad who led the family spiritually and economically. But guess who else was home while work was going on in the home? Mom. So mom was a stay-at-home working mom, and dad was a stay-at-home working dad. And they each had adult activities, and they had child responsibilities. That is the context in which you read Proverbs 31. That is how the Proverbs 31 woman can be described the way that she is. She's wonderful, she's godly, she's amazing, she works so hard. Well, how can you do both things? We can't do both things. We could when it was a family industry that kept their boat afloat. Now, because of the Industrial Revolution and the dynamics of the world that we are thrust into, in order to survive, somebody's got to go out and make enough money to support the family. And I agree with the evangelical zeitgeist that it should be pop. But I would suggest this. Even though this is the dynamic, by the way, that my family lived under, so this isn't a condemnation of you at all. This is just to at least consider, is this really the ideal way? Is this the best way for families to function? Now, please note, we don't have much of a choice. Now, if you can work your way toward being a self-sustaining family industry where the whole family contributes, like they do still on farms, like they will do in some small businesses, everybody works on it. I think that allows dad to be more engaged with family and mom to be more engaged with adults in the world. And I think if we had to say that which dynamic is more ideal, I would have to say that one. But here we are. We live in this world, and we live in this context, and so it is. We've got to noodle through what do we do about the subject of stay-at-home moms, Dr. Owen Strand.
Welcome to Wretched Worldview. On this episode, stay-at-home moms, something that no one has any opinions about. This shouldn't get hot at all.
Get clobbered.
What are pre-understandings that people have about stay-at-home moms? Let's look at these as follows. First,
please note, You've got to know what your pre-understandings are, because you currently have an opinion about stay-at-home moms. Lose it. Ditch it. I don't care if it's the biblical one or not. You've got to scrub your brain before you can populate it with only biblical thoughts.
The traditional model is for moms to raise kids and make a home. Second, a woman being in the home is sexist and unequal. Third, I can have a career and have a thriving home. Fourth, being a stay-at-home mom is fine, but it's unchallenging and inconsequential. Fifth, it doesn't matter at all who raises the kids. Gender is a sexist concept. In fact, going even further, people don't believe there is such a thing as being a mother or a father, a man or a woman today at all. We're in a very confused culture, and so we hear all sorts of things about there is no hard and fast understanding of sex or of gender, and thus stay-at-home motherhood.
Sexist. You forgot it's sexist. That men are just oppressing women by keeping them home and pregnant and making meals.
Yeah, that's a very common objection, and it's one that we have to think through.
And by the way, it's one that we should all think through. We should think this through, I think, a little bit more holistically, willingly, lovingly. That we do think about, okay, mom is staying at home all day with little children. Now, that did not used to be the case. She would interact with adults in business, working even, if nothing else, with her husband, who's an adult who was home working too. And so I do think that we need to think about these issues, but not now. We scrub our pre-understandings so that we can continue down our worldview path, 7 steps worth, with number 2, and that is explicit Bible verses.
And we shall. We will look now at our explicit Bible verses, which are going to help us frame this issue and take us out of the world of pre-understandings, good, bad, or otherwise, and help us get a biblical perspective on this tough issue. Proverbs 31 is one of the most known verses on this subject. There are many verses we could go to, but look here at the bottom. She looks well to the ways of her household and does not eat the bread of idleness. Focusing on this kind of idealized follower of God, this woman who loves her home, who is very active in all sorts of ways, we should make that very clear, and yet has this domestic focus, loves her husband, loves her children, loves being a homemaker. It's very clear in Proverbs 31 that the Bible is exalting this kind of perspective. Moving ahead to our next verse, 1 Timothy 5:9-10. Let a widow be enrolled if she's not less than 60 years of age, having been the wife of one husband, having a reputation for good works. If she has brought up children, has shown hospitality, has washed the feet of the saints, has cared for the afflicted, and has devoted herself to every good work. So in other words, this kind of woman is supposed to be cared for by the church body. A widow is not, in Paul's mind, one who is going to have to support herself, take up a career, these sorts of things. In the early church, in the first century, the church itself was actually supposed to have funds that would be set aside to care for widows, which tells us something profound about the life of the local church and how women were treated very well in the Christian community, although stereotypes about the church are the opposite. We hear the opposite about the early church. In truth, it's very clear in the Bible that Paul and others make provision for women who need care. And here we see the same principle. Paul says, "So I would have younger widows marry, bear children, manage their households, and give the adversary no occasion for slander." And then Titus 2, this famous passage, we see here at the end of it that women are called to be working at home, kind and submissive to their own husbands. This term, working at home, in the Greek, oikonergos, is actually a term that Paul coins, and it basically can be translated this way, or home worker, home manager, and it means that a woman finds her delight and duty when God gives her the gift of marriage in making a home, in beautifying it, in domestic pursuits. All things today, don't misunderstand me, that are not exalted in our society, but things that in the biblical worldview have tremendous value. Value, no, that isn't necessarily going to be podcasted or put on the big screen. Hollywood may not make a movie about women who inhabit this kind of life, and yet in God's eyes, It matters tremendously.
Actually, they would make a movie to expose how barbaric it is. And yet, we have a book that was inspired by God who tells us these are your distinctions as male and female. Your distinctives need to be recognized because I'm going to assign you roles to make sure that the planet runs well in different realms of authority: government, school, work, church, home. And so it is, we are confronted with the opposite narrative of what the world says. Now, please note, as aforementioned, I understand we can't just go, well, too bad you just stay at home, and who cares about feeling fulfilled or using your skills or applying your degree. Let's not be that cavalier about it and recognize it's a genuine need, and yet figure out the biblical role for moms. We'll continue to do that with our new resource, Wretched Worldview, on Wretched Radio.
Houston, I think we have a few problems here.
Go ahead, Wretched One.
Besides the fact I'm wearing a cardboard helmet, Houston, you have got one of the biggest false teachers in the universe. Are you kidding? He is so rich.
How rich is he, Wretched One?
I can see his house from here.